Fired on Mars is a big show, or a show we're talking about, a show when a lot of you will see this as a segment, I will have a review out. But the two guys who created it did do a short of Fired on Mars before. I can't find that anywhere. If anyone does, send it to me. I'd love to watch it and review it. But they did do a Adult Swim pilot called Wet City, which you probably haven't heard of because it aired in 3 different parts at like 4 a.m. That's not an exaggeration. The two creators of that are that and this are Nate Sherman and Nick Vokey. And basically what this is about is a guy named Danny, who's voiced by Sean Wing, who also appeared in Fired on Mars as Brandon. It's basically he lives in an apartment in New York after New York's completely flooded in a post-apocalyptic world. He mainly watches DVDs and eats barbecue chips and hangs out in his apartment. And he's having a fine life. He lives in his apartment building. And then one day, the founders, as they're called, come, attack his apartment, fuck everybody up, and steal his friend, who is a cyber shark. Who's a shark who has like a Geordie LaForge eyes on him. And they chill, and he gives him lettuce because the cyber shark is a vegetarian. And so he decides to go after the founders, leave his comfortable apartment with DVDs and barbecue chips, and then go and find his cyber shark. And goes on a huge adventure, runs into all sorts of weird people, gets on the Founders Island, more adventures happen. You really have to watch it. But it is kind of very similar to Fired on Mars. The music is very similar, the vibe is similar, but it is, I think, Fired on Mars is more like the discovery of Mars and all that. This is more of a, if you've ever seen Future Boy Conan, which is a great Miyazaki show you should check out. A lot of your favorite animated shows are very influenced by Future Boy Conan. Trust me, I know. It's very dystopian and weird, but also like the main character Danny is very chill, and so it has this very like lo-fi vibe about the whole thing, while also discovering this weird kind of sunken water world, I guess, which I like about it. But the music is very similar to Fired on Mars. The vibe is similar. I would say it's even chiller than the show that we would eventually see. I'm a little surprised Adult Swim didn't continue with this because it seems like a world you could go more into, and him and the cyber shark could go on more adventures. Maybe because the character feels so unmotivated. I mean, if you have infinite barbecue chips and a DVD player, I mean, what is there more to life, I guess? But unless your cyber shark gets kidnapped. It's a cool little short. I actually am a little disappointed that we don't have Wet City as well, because it's such a weird kind of vibe. This like droney synthesizer music in a sunken New York City while he's hanging out in like this post-apocalyptic world, and you kind of learn more about it as the show goes on in the 3 parts. The Vimeo link, which will be at the bottom of this video, all the 3 parts are together, so I'd recommend you watch that. But if that for some reason goes down, all 3 parts individually are on YouTube. But it's I would say it's actually one of the few pilots I see where I'm like, I kind of wish this was a show. I like the vibe of it. I liked Fired on Mars, but I think this is kind of an interesting lone wolf kind of a show, because he is kind of a lone guy just chilling, kind of figuring out his own existential crisis in a weird dystopian world with, trying to find his weird sci-fi cyber shark and what that all means. So I think the animation style is a little looser than what you saw in Fired on Mars. It seems a little closer than the small clips I've seen of the Fired on Mars short, but I think these guys have a definitely like interesting creative auteur voice. Like you can definitely tell it's by the same people. So it's I would say like Cornbread just say, but yeah, that was dope and fascinating. But yeah, I would say it is very dope and fascinating as well, and just an interesting little odd chill vibe of a show that if you like Fired on Mars, it's definitely the thing you should go to next. Maybe that eventually Adult Swim will get around to it, but it seems like they're kind of focused on other things. But it's cool to think of the other possibilities and other creative outlets they could have later on.